Okay, good to go.
Okay, good morning,
Good
everyone in the
morning.
room, Co-Chair Chang,
Good morning.
Director Mary Alice Evans. Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. It's our monthly meeting, quarterly meeting.
It's our meeting.
I told you without a script, I'm kind of bereft.
You're doing good. You're doing
Let me
good.
just read some of the formalities. According to Sunshine Law guidelines, the meeting will be hybrid with attendees participating virtually. The online has the Zoom link for you. And information is on the Zoom link online at the, is it DLNR on the Hawaii Invasive Species Council meeting on the DLNR website. Okay. If you're meeting in person here, we're in the DLNR boardroom. You're welcome to join us, Kalanimoku building. The council meeting will be held using interactive conference technology under section 92-3.7 HRS. Council members, staff, testifiers, and the public can choose to participate in person, online via Zoom, or by telephone. The public may also view the live meeting via its live stream at the YouTube link that's also on your agenda online. To provide written testimony, we encourage interested persons to submit written testimony in advance of the meeting, which will be distributed to council members prior to the meeting and allow a timely review. Please submit your written testimony via email to Jack F. Reef, who is in the room with us today, researcher@hawaii.gov. Written testimonies can also be mailed to addresses there. Written testimonies may be posted upon the Hawaii Invasive Species Council meeting website. As a precaution, please be mindful that any personal information prior to submitting unless you intend it to be shared. Late testimony will be retained as part of the record and distributed to council members as soon as practicable, but we cannot ensure council members will receive it in sufficient time to review prior to any decision-making. To provide in-person oral testimony, masks are highly encouraged. Attend in person at the DLNR boardroom, room 132, Kalanimoku building at 1151 Punch Bowl Street, Honolulu 96813, to provide testimony by telephone. On the day of the meeting, at the start of the agenda item you wish to testify on, dial 1-253-205-0468, which is the Zoom link. Input meeting ID 820-4707-2037 and follow the prompts. To provide video Zoom testimony, send your request in a timely manner to jackfreef.researcher@hawaii.gov with your information, email address, and the agenda item you wish to testify on. Once your request has been received, you'll receive a confirmation email with pertinent information. You may testify without signing up in advance. We ask that you identify yourself and any affiliation before speaking, but you can choose also not to do so. If you're joining the Zoom meeting, I guess you should already be here. The link is there. Special accommodations. If you need auxiliary aid and or service or other accommodation due to a disability, please contact Jack, the Hawaii Invasive Species Council planner, at 808-587-0166 or jack.f.reef.researcher@hawaii.gov as soon as possible. Requests made as early as possible have a greater likelihood of being fulfilled. Upon request, this agenda and other materials are available in alternate accessible forms. Note, agenda items may be taken out of order. Okay. Any questions from someone in the room or online?
No.
Hearing, seeing none. Introducing more formally, we have next to me
Don Chang, Chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources.
Mary Alice Evans, a Director of the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
I'm Representative Lisa Martin, Waimanalo Kailua, District 51.
Okay. And I'm co-chairing today. It's my turn to do the chair duties, and Sharon Hurd, Department of Agriculture Chairperson. So calling the meeting to order, it looks like it's 10:37. And we're going to be introducing council members. Could I have some help with that?
Yep, of course. I think folks in the room introduce themselves. We have Matt Carano.
Do you
Hi,
wish?
thank you, and apologies for not being able to be there in person. Thanks for including the hybrid link.
And Matt, you're from Department of Health?
Excuse me, sorry. Yep, Department of Health.
And we have University of Hawaii.
University of Hawaii.
Parwan.
Parvinder Grewal, I'm here and alone.
Tammy Lee, I think.
Department of Transportation.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Tammy Lee from the Department of Transportation.
Wow, we're all here. And then,
And then we do have
Okay.
legislative members attending. I see Representative Kahaloa.
Yes, aloha everyone. Happy to be here with you.
Senator DeCoit.
Aloha, my koko. My name is Satomofa. I'm the committee clerk for Senator DeCoy. I'm here on behalf of her, and I'll be here if you have any questions.
And then any other council members?
it's Claire.
Claire is the assistant for Rep. Kahaloa.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And we also have our assigned AG Danica Swinson that's online.
Very
Okay.
good.
Thank you, Chelsea, for that. Next item is approval of the minutes from the August 28th, 2024 Hawaii Invasive Species Council meeting. Any revisions? I do have a revision. There's reference made in the minutes to AB 2619. That should either be House Bill 2619 or Act 231. Noted, thank you. Any other revisions to the minutes? Otherwise, may I have a go?
Yep.
Anybody?
Yeah, Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of draft minutes of August 28th, 2024 with the amendment.
Thank you, Chair.
Second.
Thank you, Mary Alice. With moved and seconded, any objections, recusals? Hearing, seeing none, minutes are approved as amended. Thank you. Moving on to the next item is a submittal, item 4. It is an action item submittal. Request for final approval to adopt proposed new subtitle and new chapters under Hawaii Administrative Rules as Title 13, Subtitle 14, Chapters 325, General Provisions, and 326, Control and Eradication of Invasive Species. May I have a motion to hear the request?
For discussion?
moved. Okay.
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Who will be making a presentation? Guess who?
And I'll ask Stephanie Easley from the Coordinating Group on Alien Pet Species to join me for this presentation and submittal. Let's get into. So aloha, council members. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Chelsea Arnott, program support for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. And with me, we'll have her introduce herself.
I'm Stephanie Easley. I'm a legal fellow with the Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species.
Thank you.
So appreciate the opportunity to come before you on this submittal, which is a request for final approval to adopt proposed new subtitle and new chapters under Hawaii Administrative Rules as Title 13, Subtitle 14, Chapters 325, the General Provisions, and 326, Control and Eradication of Invasive Species. The presentation I have today is just helps overview and take us through the submittal step by step, and then of course opportunity for any comments and questions after. So to get started, I do want to start, we're going through the public rulemaking process for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council administrative rules that we're proposing. This started in May, well, it started way before this, but formal process started May 29th, 2024 at the council meeting where our HISC members voted to initiate rulemaking for the proposed rules. After that approval, we posted administrative rules through the park site, and then we moved to for approval at a public hearing at the June 20th, 2024 Small Business Regulatory Review Board meeting. With that, we were approved to go to public hearing. We set that up for September 25th, 2024. It was an evening public hearing from 6 to 7:30 that had the ability to join in person in this boardroom or virtually via Zoom. And what I'm going to talk about is that public hearing and the recommendations and testimony that came out of that hearing. So I'll be able to share more details on that. This is also included as Exhibit 1. We did include QR codes because it's a hefty meeting packet. We have a few printed copies if council members that are here in person or even members of the public are interested in having that and following along. Okay. So I just want to go over the proposed rules briefly. Again, we went over this in a little bit more detail when we first brought it before the council at the May 29th meeting. Again, this is administrative rules that enact our Hawaii Invasive Species Council, the Hawaii Revised Statute 194. It includes 2 chapters. The first chapter, 325, contains 3 sections that set out the general provisions as followed. It sets out the purpose, the definitions, and relationships to other laws. This is all in the submittal, so I'm not going to go into too much detail with this section so we can focus on the outcomes of the public hearing. 326. Sorry for this slide, but this is just how the legal world is. So 326 chapter, that contains 6 sections related to the authority of the HISC departments and their and the counties and their agents to carry out actions to control and eradicate invasive species identified by the council as follows. The first section, 326-1, invasive species identified by the council for control or eradication. Section 2, requirements for control or eradication on private property. Section 326-3, this is notice, so it sets out the requirements for a notice to a private property owner or tenant or occupant before control or eradication actions may be carried out on that private property. Section 4 is moving into requirements for control or eradication by a private property owner. Section 326-5 is requirements for control or eradication on public property. And the last section, 326-6, sets out warrants. So the requirements for his department or county to set forth, seek a warrant to carry out control or eradication. And sorry for that blitz of the review. Okay, so moving into what is, get this bar out of the screen. So the public hearing, again, this was held on September 25th. You can find a summary of the testimony and then also the included testimony that was submitted as exhibits 3 and 4. We had a total of 8 oral testimonies and 7 written testimonies that were received. 3 people provided oral testimony in person at the public hearing host location, which was in this room, and 5 people provided oral testimony through the Zoom link. All testimony that was submitted was in support of the proposed rules, except for 1 individual testifier who did not identify support or opposition. 2 individuals suggested changes to the proposed rules, including changes to the list of species identified by the Council for Control or Eradication, set out in section 13-326-1 of the proposed rules. So summary of the hearing officer's report, you can find that in Exhibit 2 in more detail. There were suggestions on making adjustments to the list of identified species. These suggestions that we're incorporating aren't broadening the list, they're actually narrowing it down. And a lot of that change is happening within the formerly known genus of Tibicina. We originally had this listed as all genus in the family Tibicina. All genus, Tibicina genus will be added to the list, and this is reflected in the Department of Agriculture's noxious weed rules. So there's been taxa changes to this genre. So we are looking at narrowing that down and being more specific at what species we're wanting to include on this list.
Chair, can I ask Chelsea a question?
Sure.
Yes.
Is there a common name for Tibuchina?
Cane, it's Glory Bush or Cane T Timachina, yes. So I can go by Glory Bush, so I don't have to make it confusing.
I thought you were showing off.
No, I don't want to read any of these genus names right
Okay,
now in front of,
okay.
in a public meeting. So we're focusing on Glory Bush, and I have a pictures of each of the species that are on the identified list near the end of this that I can show you. So for Glory Bush, what we've done, we've removed the genus here from the species list based on testimony and further research that there are no members in this genus that are currently naturalized or as targets of any department or organization for control or eradication efforts in Hawaii. We also removed the other 3 genera that were included on the identified species list that are other genus that were incorporated into Timachina or Glory Bush. So we removed those and we replaced them with the specific species names that you see under item 2. And these are known targets for control and eradication in Hawaii. We also removed just the genus Myconia, and we've replaced it with the single species Myconia calabescens, so it's specific to that species. So these proposed changes are in response to the public testimony. There were requests to add additional species to this list, and we just want to recognize that this is an initial proposed list of species identified for control or eradication. This isn't intended to be a comprehensive list of invasive species in the state. Instead, it's intended to include species that are current targets of either state departments or partner organizations where active prevention, control, or eradication efforts are already underway. We do have the ability to add additional species and even delist species in the future through Chapter 91 rulemaking. We also included in the proposed rules just minor non-substantive edits that were suggested by Governor's office for clarity. And like I mentioned, these are the list of species. Again, it doesn't broaden the list in any way from what we originally proposed to the council. It actually narrows it with those specific species. We have the fountain grass, devilweed, the 2 species of pampas grass. This is feathertop grass, which is in the same genus as fountain grass, fireweed. And again, the purple flower there, that's the Glory Bush or the Tibuchina species that has been specified to those 2 species. And of course, Myconia calabescens, which is a long-standing target of the Island Invasive Species Committees. We also have our list of invertebrates. This hasn't changed. We had a minor error on the genus for Africanized honeybees, and we've made that adjustment. I think we put aphis instead of apis. But other than that, these species were proposed the same on the May 29th meeting. And we have our 1 vertebrate and then the 2 fungal pathogens that cause rapid opiate death. And with that, that's the end of the presentation on the submittal. And I can pass it back to you, Chair, for any questions.
Did you have a recommendation?
Yes, the recommendation is the HISC approve the proposed administrative rules as Title 13, Subtitle 14, Chapters 325, General Provisions, and 326, Control and Eradication of Invasive Species as set out in Exhibit 5.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Based on that recommendation, happy to take public testimony. Any hands?
I'll raise my hand. Okay. So I have a question, Chelsea. Well, one, I do want to applaud the Kappa Akai analysis, Article 12, Section 7. I think that I appreciate that you went through the analysis. I also want to acknowledge that you made appropriate changes based upon public comments. So you heard the comments and you made appropriate changes. My question is related to the issuance of a warrant. It's unclear to me, 13-326-3 under notice, subpart B, the department or county may seek a warrant under 13-326-6 that authorizes the entry for controller eradication. And then I looked at 13-3266. It doesn't say the department or county seeking a warrant. Who are they seeking the warrant from? It's not defined in 13-325. Warrant isn't included in the definitions. So it may not be clear to me. Perhaps it is very clear to everybody else, but I'm a lawyer, so I'm thinking about if we're gonna issue something. So yeah, if you could just explain to me, who is the warrant issued to? What's the enforcement authority on the warrant? But if you can just provide me a little bit more background on the warrant.
You want me to pass it to Danica first?
Yeah, because that was the other question.
Okay.
I'm assuming this was reviewed by the Attorney General's office, and that's why Danica's here. Okay.
Yes. Danica, I'm not sure if you want to take that. If not, I have Stephanie in the room that's ready to answer also.
Why don't you guys go ahead? I'm still pulling up the particular provision so I can answer Chair's question.
Oh, and I see President Cochise here too. Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's a great question. Warrants are, a powerful tool to be
Mhm.
managed.
Going to
The warrant would be sought from the district court in which the property is located.
Mm,
And that's pursuant to the statute, and that's included in the language of section 6.
Did I miss that? Oh, I shall submit, okay, I apologize, to the district court of the circuit in which, okay,
So that would be, and then the warrant would be issued to the entity seeking the warrant to have access to the property.
okay.
And that any type of law, the statute says a police officer is limited to who can assist in law enforcement capability. That would again be something that would be decided by the district court at the time the warrant is issued.
So this is state district court, so we could not enter, any private property until a warrant is issued?
The way it's set up is if the owner consents, it
Okay.
has to affirmatively consent, not
Yeah.
just not consent.
Is it in writing? Is the
Uh,
consent in writing?
The consent, the owner just has to consent. I don't think it is written consent. The notice has to be written, and
Okay,
then they respond in writing. So they get the consent from the owner. If they don't have consent, then they have to go through the warrant procedure. Or if they don't get consent, or if the person says no, then they apply to the district court. And the language that is in this section 6 with these 2 paragraphs is what was supplied to us by the AG's
Okay.
office.
Chair,
okay,
can I follow up?
Yes.
What if we have an out-of-state landowner who can't be contacted to provide the initial notice, and can't be contacted to serve the warrant on? Is there an alternate means of getting court approval to enter the property for the purpose of eradicating or controlling? Oh, there she is.
Hi. Great job, Stephanie. I completely concur, and I'm glad that you found that it was in there, because I was like, I thought we put it in there that they have. But so in the event that there's an out-of-state landowner and you can't get the written notice to the landowner, in a situation like that, the occupant of the property, so say there's a longtime tenant or a vacation rental person, it's kind of the same as like a search warrant. If they showed up with a search warrant, anyone who has apparent authority to allow them to search could also give the consent. And notice posted on the property would be sufficient.
Oh, okay.
okay.
That answers my question, Chair.
Okay, thank you for both Chair and Mary Alice. We'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that Senate President Ron Kochi is in the room. Hey there. Okay, so I have a question. I had the same type of question, by the way. This does not give the agency the authority to enter the residence, just the property?
It would be wherever the identified invasive species is suspected or reasonably known to occur. So it doesn't specify whether, I would hope it's not inside the house. I mean, typically, the situations that we've heard that this authority would be exercised is, outside the actual dwelling.
I would respectfully ask that we check on that because, partner agencies and groups can enter the property, but you need special authority to get into a private residence, which, by the way, from what I understand, the Department of Agriculture has. Oh, she's raising her hand, Danica.
So, if the agency wanted to enter into a residence on a private property, they would have to articulate that within the application for the search warrant. And then the search warrant that's granted could include entry into a residence or dwelling or like a shed, any kind of closed building. They would just have to articulate that in their application for the search warrant. And then the language of the search warrant would have to reflect that, the department or the council can only go in for that purpose. And then since the people going in to do this type of eradication are not necessarily law enforcement, they're biologists and that kind of thing. If they do observe any unlawful activity, it wouldn't necessarily, trigger any action except, calling the police, but they won't have any authority to enforce laws inside that residence. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I would ask for some clarification within the rule changes to add that in there so that it's clear that the property includes private residence as long as it is included in the search warrant. I think that's important for insurance and liability purposes.
We're sort of at the end stage of
Oh, I see.
the rulemaking process, right? So if we made any substantive changes at this point, you'd have to start your process
I
again.
withdraw my request.
But the question is legitimate. I mean, so I would assume that that's what you would have included in the warrant. There's got to be some kind of probable cause that they've got a closed shed or a greenhouse, and we believe that the species are there. So, yeah. So I'm hoping within the confines of the existing draft, the warrant can specify location.
Is that okay?
Danica can correct me if I'm wrong, but the court would have to look at the reasonableness of
Yeah,
each
yeah, yeah.
search. And
Right.
there's a higher standard to go into a private
Okay,
residence
right.
than to go in some undeveloped property. And that would go, the constitutional protection state, that will never change.
Right.
So those are built in if the person, landowner doesn't use them.
Okay, that's helpful.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Chair Chang,
Yes.
I didn't have my person at the laptop to unmute me when you recognize me. I know I don't get on personally enough on these, and my staff monitors it, and I am about to jump on another 11 o'clock Zoom meeting, but I wanted to tell Chelsea and the rest of your team, I appreciate the work that everybody's doing, and I appreciate that Chelsea won't let me avoid her emails, and she will make sure that I know everything that is going on, because she will paper me to make sure that that's happening. So just want to let you know I am getting the emails, I'm reading it, and I appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I'm going to go jump on to another Zoom meeting.
Thank you for joining us, President.
Thank you,
Yep.
Senate President.
Thank you very much.
So is there any other public testimony or from the board?
Just one more question. Sometimes there's an exigent circumstance or it's an urgency, we know, but can we get a warrant before the 30-day posting? Okay.
There's a provision for emergency.
Okay.
So there was, red imported fire and infestation found.
Yes,
and they
yes.
didn't want to wait 30 days, couldn't immediately contact the owner. They would still have the protections of the warrant.
Okay,
They would have to show to the
Ah,
court
I
that
see.
it's there,
Okay.
that the search would be reasonable.
so it's sort of like getting a TRO, that would be the expeditious process. So you, okay, so where's the section on the emergency?
It's access to access to private property.
And there are two.
I think it's 13-326-3 subsection C.
The notice.
Two,
Section 3, she said.
three,
No,
subpart
there's
two.
not. It's not there.
It's 13-326-5E.
Oh, it's 5E. Oh, it's five. We're looking at the, so it's 325
No, 326.
Oh, 326 dash 5E, 326 dash 5E. No. Okay. Oh, okay, this is one.
Oh, an urgent
Yeah,
response
okay.
on public
Urgent
property and the
response.
consent.
That's public property.
Yeah.
Yeah, the private property should be under.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Sharon?
Yes.
May I ask a question? How long does it take to get a warrant? Like, what is that process? Are courts backed up, or is that something that can happen quickly? Do we know?
I would defer to our AG on that, as I've never been through the process.
I have worked, hi, this is Danica again. I've gotten a lot of warrants before. There is always a first, let me start over. There is always a district court judge on call to sign warrants 24/7. So usually the warrant will be signed within a few hours of application.
That's great news. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you.
Private property one is the top of page 326-5.
326.
-5, the page number. Notwithstanding subsections B and C, which require the notice, the department or county determines that control or eradication of invasive species requires an urgent response on private property to the consent of the owner or tenant or occupant applicable, cannot be obtained immediately. The department or county may seek a warrant under section 13-326.
This is 326 dash
Section
3. Oh, I see. Okay.
It's on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's, oh, page 5. Okay.
And it reflects the
Okay,
same language
right, okay.
for the public property one that we read
Okay.
before, but just for private property.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you for answering those questions. Okay. And appreciate the good work on the rules. This was an important tool
Yes.
to.
We understand how difficult it is to go through the rulemaking process.
Well, I just want to recognize the work of Stephanie from Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species, and then Danica AG, and
Yeah.
really appreciate their help moving this forward.
Okay, so still calling for further testimony from the public or from the board. Chelsea, do you see any hands?
I don't see hands. We did have submitted written testimony from 2 individuals.
Christy Martin.
Yeah.
Is Christie,
Yeah,
we just acknowledge that testimony has been submitted. And from Kevin Facenda,
He's not present.
both in support. Okay, hearing, seeing none, calling for the vote. Based on the previous roll call, we'll just do a voice, not a voice, we'll do a, whether there's objections, recusals. Hearing none. Hearing, seeing none.
And it's just of the voting numbers, right? The 5.
Yeah.
6.
I'm looking right at Matt. He's
Or
not
6
saying
voting
anything. So
I'm in favor.
favor, all,
Yes.
we'll say unanimous.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 5. This is a non-voting item. It's an update on the implementation of the Interagency Memorandum of Understanding for the prevention, rapid response, and control or eradication of high priority pests. Priority pests are defined as little fire ants, coqui frogs, and coconut rhinoceros beetle. Chelsea Arnott will be doing the presentation.
Great, well, hello, it's me again. So Chelsea Arnott, Program Support Staff for the Hawaii Invasive Species Council. I'm happy to provide an overview on the implementation of the interagency MOU for the prevention, rapid response and control eradication of high priority pests among the Department of Agriculture, University of Hawaii, Department of Land and Natural Resources. I'm just gonna kind of give the umbrella view of implementation so far, and then I'm gonna hand it over to some of the partners that are part of the implementation to talk more specifically on updates with priority pests and some of those specific action items that have come out of the MOU. Okay, we will get started here. So just some background on how the MOU came about. There are multi-agency responses occurring in each of the counties for rapid response and ongoing management for those priority pests. So the priority pests are recognized as coqui frogs, little fire ant, coconut rhinoceros beetle. They involve multiple state entities and partner organizations that are working within each of the counties at different aspects of response efforts. I'm highlighting just a couple of those multi-agency responses. Coqui frogs, that naturalized population that's in Waimanalo here on Oahu. The largest infestation of little fire ant detected on Kauai. And then there's just this increased amount of infestations, not only here on Windward Oahu, but also on East Maui now. And then in 2023, we saw the first detections of coconut rhinoceros beetle that were not on Oahu and has subsequently heard of new detections on those islands. We did have a workshop in early 2024 that brought together Department of Agriculture, DLNR, University of Hawaii, along with University of Hawaii projects like the Island Invasive Species Committee, Hawaii Ant Lab, and Coconut Rhinoceros Beetle Response Team to talk about response efforts and roles and responsibilities regarding actions related to those priority pests. Some of the challenges we flagged during that workshop were just a lack of regular and consistent communication. Sometimes there was just no real need identified for some of the actions or the responses that were happening. There could be conflicting or inconsistent public messaging. And we didn't really have any protocols or agreements on data sharing and how we are all looking at the big picture of response efforts for these pests that we can do through data sharing. And of course, lack of resources and capacities and how that equates to the actions that are happening on the ground. So a memorandum of understanding was put together. This is the overarching goal. It's the prevention of new infestations, the containment and eradication of all incipient infestations, and the control and containment of existing infestations for those three priority pests: coqui frogs, little fire ant, and coconut rhinoceros beetle. So just definitions of the participants, the signatories, those are the folks, the leadership, the directors of the Department of Land and Natural Resources and Department of Agriculture, and the president of the University of Hawaii. And then the partner organizations that are included in this MOU are reflected here below, but we also know there's a larger external partnership of folks that are working on this. That includes, other state agencies, organizations, nonprofit, even private organizations. This is a layout of some of the actions that are outlined in the MOU. Again, what the MOU is addressing is those challenges that we identified at that early 2024 workshop. April 19th, the MOU is signed. We had our first monthly partner meeting, May 13th, and we've been up to date on that. We have monthly meetings with our partner agencies every month, even folks, federal agencies, other state agencies that aren't necessarily outlined in the MOU can join those meetings. We have been working towards development of response plans for those 3 priority pests. The first one on the timeline was little fire ants. We've met that deadline. We have our response plans. And just to, highlight that these aren't solidified plans, these are living documents. As we move through response, as we get more resources, as we increase capacity or lose capacity, we always need to come together and update the plans to reflect the response and make sure that we are understanding where everybody is working and what resources we have to do that work. So yes, we have our templates and we have these documents for Little Fire Ant for each of the counties to work on with response. But these kind of are convening documents, and what we're wanting to and are going to do is create county wide working groups that really use those response plans as the baseline for conversation to keep the coordination and communication moving forward. And we're working on them already for coconut rhinoceros beetle and for coqui frog. So a lot of the actions that you see here are in regards to moving towards county-based response plans. There's also work being done on creating data sharing protocols and also having survey and treatment protocols as baselines for each of those pests that we can all reference. In April 2025, through the MOU, we need to have a partner and signatory annual meeting, which we're all going to work towards and hopefully have something in person. And then this just outlines some of the regular meetings and communications that are happening already. And I wanted to say this update for on our agenda is really from the public's comments. I think it came about at our May council meeting that folks wanted to know what was happening with the MOU and they wanted to have more regular status updates for those priority pests. So that's what we're trying to do through the forum of the council is provide that information to the public. And one of the other comments was, can we have some kind of place where we can see the MOU and we can read it and also see the documents and actions that are coming out of that. So through our HISP webpage, we have created a page dedicated to the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding. It summarizes the actions in the MOU. It will be a place that we continually update and we'll put summaries of our response plans up there. And keep people posted, but also we'll use the forum of the council to provide updates going forward. So with that, that's a general overview for me, and I want to give, what the public asked for, which is updates on those specific priority pests, and I'm going to pass it over to.
Before you go on,
folks.
could
Yes.
you give the website for that, or at least let the public know where they can find that?
Yes, it's this very long link at the top, unfortunately.
It's under DLNR.
Yes,
Okay.
It's DLNR, it's our Hawaii Invasive Species Council specific page, and you could type in 2024 MOU for priority pests, and it should come up in the Google or
Thank you.
whatever platform you use.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you. Okay, we'll stop share. And I think on the agenda, we had Michelle Montgomery from Hawaii Ant Lab. I don't see
Michelle. Recognizing Michelle.
I don't see her on here,
Oh.
so we could actually move to if
I see Nate.
yeah, if Nate is ready.
Aloha. Yes, I'm ready. I'll start sharing my screen here. Okay, can you folks see this presentation?
Yes.
All right, so today, good morning, everybody. Today I'll be providing some updates regarding our Oahu coqui frog response, specifically focusing in on some of the innovative approaches that we're exploring in controlling coqui frogs at our windward sites. I'll have my contact information on the last slide if anybody has questions or needs clarification that we're unable to get to at this meeting, but I will try to move quickly so that there's time for Q&A. So I just first want to recognize that this has developed over the last few years into a very robust multi-agency effort. We have very dedicated community members that have been volunteering their time, as well as community groups who have been volunteering their time from the Waimanalo Agricultural Association, the Waimanalo Neighborhood Board, 808 Cleanups. We also have some very dedicated and hardworking staff from DLNR DOFA, from HDOA Plant Quarantine, from OISC, and from KMWP. And we've also contracted some services out from Aloha Aina Drones, which is a new company with experience in invasive species management, as well as the Listening Observatory for Hawaiian Ecosystems, which is a bioacoustics lab based out of Hilo. And I would like to note that the folks at LOHE have been providing all of their work pro bono right now, but we are working on incorporating some funding for their hard work because they've provided us with some great data analysis. Before we focus in on the windward sites, I did want to provide an island-wide overview of our sites. Starting with Waimanalo, that primarily resides on Department of Hawaiian Homeland's properties. There's also a small board water supply property parcel over there where they have a water tank. The size right now we estimate to be about 33 acres, and we do have a population estimate for total frogs at this site of anywhere from 9,050 to 43,200 frogs. I'm not going to go too much into detail about how we've come up with these numbers. This is a wide range, I understand that, and it isn't exact, but I'm happy to answer questions about how we came to this population estimate during the Q&A session. For the Kuli'o'o site, this site is directly over the summit from the Pu'uokona or Waimanalo site. It's on forest reserve land. It's approximately 13 acres. And as of right now, we don't have a population estimate, but we are working on that. There's also the Pololo site. This is a site that the Department of Agriculture began treating, I believe, in 2017. It's in a stream bed. It's in the Waiama'o stream bed, starting behind a nursery, and then the population moves downstream across several private properties, resulting in about 8 acres of our estimated population extent. We also don't have a population estimate for this site either, but we have already set out some of the recording devices needed to get those population estimates. There's also one other site that I'm aware of on Central Oahu. I don't know a ton about this site. I think that the property owner was hesitant to provide any information. I do believe that Plant Quarantine can provide some information regarding, number of frogs treated, estimated acreage, things like that. So if you want more information regarding that site, you can contact the Department of Agriculture Plant Quarantine branch. And just a quick spatial representation for you folks. These are the sites for the multi-agency effort, the Waimanalo, Kuli'o'o, and Pololo sites. The reason I wanted to highlight this spatially is because we believe the Pololo site was established before the other two sites. We don't believe that there are calling frogs very much in the forest and up into the summit between these 3 sites. And we do believe that the Waimanalo site was established before the Kuli'o'o site, and the Waimanalo site is close to other nurseries. So I just wanted to highlight this because we believe as a group that the frogs are likely being transmitted throughout the island via the nursery trade, whether that be intra-island. And so I just want to emphasize how important regulations like the rules that we were just discussing for the HISC and the Chapter 4-72 Hawaii Administrative Rule revisions are going to be in terms of limiting the spread of these high priority pests like coqui frog. I also wanted to provide a brief overview of treatment methods and procedures that we're utilizing at each site. So for Waimanalo, we have some habitat modification. That was the first step. It's also currently ongoing. We have a community hand capture program that's ongoing. We have bioacoustics monitoring there. We've begun some experimental drone treatments, and we have the citric pipeline in development. For the Kuli'o'o site, we also have done some habitat modification. We're standing by for drone treatments, which we'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation. And we need some more bioacoustics monitoring so we can send some data off to the LOHE lab over in Hilo. At the Palolo site, we're assisting HDOA-led efforts with trailer-mounted power sprays in the area. We're also conducting some staff hand capture. We haven't utilized volunteers yet, but that is potentially something on the horizon should we determine it's needed. And we have began collecting data for bioacoustics monitoring in this area as well. For the Central Oahu site, what I do know is that it sounds like it's been very successful treatment from HDOA. The last I heard, there were no calling frogs any longer at this site, although I don't know the details for the treatment methods. So if you'd like that information, please reach out to HDOA PQ, and I think they'll be able to provide you with all of the great work that they've done over there. Okay, so focusing in now on the Waimanalo site, I wanted to give you folks an alternative spatial perspective. But what you can see here is this is Ka'ulu Street. At the end of Ka'ulu Street is a gate leading toward a Board of Water Supply tank. This ridge right here has been the primary initial hotspot. This is where we installed the initial leg of the pipeline, the citric pipeline. And these green lines represent a very loose estimation of where the borders of the infestation are. I say loose because it is difficult to detect the borders of a koki infestation. It depends on calling frogs. Frogs are not always calling. There are weather conditions that can limit calling frogs. There are times of year, they can be seasonal. But this is where we expect the borders to be at this point in time. So we're focusing all of our community hand capture efforts in this area. Our habitat modification is throughout this area for a variety of other tasks, which I'll talk about in a few slides. And the citric pipeline will be deployed and implemented in this area, mostly focusing on this side, on the eastern side of the site, because that's where we are noticing more of the spread going, although we are keeping an eye on this other border as well. So habitat modification, DOFA has taken the lead on this. They have extensive chainsaw experience. We are grateful for them that they've been able to step up and lead this action. It's crucial. It's not only a tried and true method of koki frog management, it's also assisting with some of our more innovative and experimental treatment methods. So this is very key, and OISC is trying to get some more staff trained up so we can provide more capacity to DOFA. But they've taken the lead on that in this area, and it's incredibly helpful with treatment efficacy because the citric mixture, when it doesn't have to go through as much when it doesn't have to penetrate through as much vegetation, that means more of that mixture is coming into contact with the koki frogs, and we're getting more effective treatments. It can also provide a koki break similar to a fire break when done around the borders of a infestation, helping slow the population spread. It also helps clear hazards for aerial and drone treatments, and it will be being utilized in the next few months to establish helicopter landing zones and drop zones for reservoir deployment, those reservoirs are going to be crucial for our citric pipeline. And then moving on to our community volunteer hand capture program. This was actually initiated because we have had such strong community support that they've reached out to us. They wanted to help. And once we had the right of entry squared away, and once we had some staffing capacity squared away, we were able to implement this. And we're able to provide community volunteers weekly opportunities to go out and hand capture. And while hand capturing cannot alone eradicate a breeding established population, it can be really useful when used strategically around the borders of an infestation. It can also be used strategically to truth some of the recording analysis, which I'll talk about when we get to the bioacoustics monitoring section of the presentation. So it's a very useful tool, and we're very lucky and grateful to have such dedicated community support. This effort is being led by DOFA and OISC, but we have extensive support from the Department of Agriculture, from the Waimanalo Ag Association, from the Waimanalo Neighborhood Board, and from 808 Cleanups. Bioacoustics monitoring. This has taken me a little bit to wrap my head around, so I'll do my best to explain it to you folks. But essentially what we do is we gather baseline data by setting out recording devices out in the forest at specific sites. And that allowed us to overnight collect recordings of calling coqui frogs. We then did the same thing before and after habitat modification, aka clearing, as it's represented in the graph on the right, as well as before and after treatments. This allows us to get some sort of idea for what the coqui frogs are doing after we take an action. And that's really important to inform our next steps, inform our strategy, and to provide population estimates. So we take those recordings and then we send them over to the LOHE lab, and they use a perch or surf perch, which is a modeling algorithm that they've said is 97.8% accurate in recognizing coqui calls. And what it does is it measures the amount of coqui calls per unit time at a given site in relation to the other sites. So it provides relative densities at each listening site. It can be used to actually estimate specific amounts of calling frogs, but that takes quite a bit more data analysis. And so we're going to be working with the lab to try and streamline that and figure out what they need from us in order to get those more accurate population estimates. So initial results, we see a decrease in calling frogs after habitat modification, which is not completely unexpected. And we also have seen not as much of a decrease as we would have hoped after the initial drone treatment, but have identified some reasons as to why that is. So for our next steps with bioacoustic monitoring, we're going to need some additional drone treatments to increase our sample size to get more data to send over to the lab. And then we're going to also experiment with the Aloha Aina drones contractor to try to capture some recordings via drone. And that's going to be really important because if we can figure out that that works well, that will be a very useful tool for the Kuli'o'o population, which is very difficult to access by ground. So we have embarked on our initial experimental drone treatment. This is the idea is that we identify a small target area. The contractor utilizes a specific type of agricultural drone to dispense our citric mixture over the target area. And our target treatment window was from dusk till dawn. The reason that we were doing these evening treatments is because calling frogs crawl up into the canopy. They try to get higher. They start calling, looking for mates. And so in order to try and target those calling frogs, we needed to attempt to do this during darkness hours. We were able to dispense 26.3 gallons of citric mixture. That's about 16% citric acid mixed into water with about half an ounce of pypyranol butoxide, which is just an adjuvant. It's called a synergist. And essentially what it does is it helps the citric acid mix with the water better so that you can get a more uniform and effective treatment onto the frogs. That allowed us to treat roughly 0.35 acres. And we ran into quite a few operational obstacles during this initial treatment. We had prepared to deploy 100 gallons of citric acid. We were only able to get about a quarter of that. Some of the issues that we ran into were flight line hazards from the canopy. So that's where we're going to utilize more habitat modifications to remove those hazards. It's also, you need to be line of sight whenever you're flying a drone. And so low visibility at night also, in addition to the hazards providing those visible obstacles, also made it difficult for us to continue the treatment beyond the initial few flights. We also had an issue with staging area elevation. The drone has a limitation on how high it can fly. That's an easy fix. So we'll address that during the next experimental drone flight. And then there were some technical glitches, and we believe a lot of those are in relation to the staging area, but the contractor is working on that, and we'll have a much better approach for our next aerial experimental drone treatments. And we will also be utilizing the citric pipeline. This has been in discussion for a while. We've run into delays, whether it be with the right of entry, whether it be with staff capacity, whether it be with getting our accounts open to get the funding, but we are on the right track, and we are looking to have this operational in 2025. The citric pipeline essentially is a system of interconnected PVC pipes, fire hoses, pumps, motors, and reservoirs. And what we do is we'll mix the citric acid mixture into those trailer mounted power sprayers that both OISC and Department of Agriculture have right now. And we have a way to connect those sprayers up to the pipeline. And we use auxiliary pumps and motors then to transport the citric mixture throughout the pipeline and up into the staged reservoirs. And then we will have staff using the fire hoses to dispense the citric mixture onto our target areas. This is modeled after a system used by the Maui Invasive Species Committee, and a big thank you to those folks who have helped us in the development of our citric pipeline and the different difficulties we have on our island versus on Maui. We're very appreciative to them. And what we're going to be doing once this is up and running is strategically cycling through treatment subunits. So we have this area divided into different subunits. We'll, of course, be spraying from the borders in, as is typical with koki frog management, to prevent our treatments from pushing koki frogs into new areas. We'll be prioritizing high density areas, of course, but we'll be systematically cycling through the infestation's extent to make sure that we're not leaving pukas and that we are fully treating the full extent of this population. So in summary, we need some more experimental drone treatments, and that's being worked on. That's being scheduled right now. There is some funding through DOFA, and thank you to those folks who have been able to set aside some resources for this. If this is deemed effective, the drone treatments, it's going to be a crucial tool for the Kuli'o'o populations, because as I mentioned, it's very difficult to access that site. The citric pipeline is going to need some more pumps and motors and just an expanded layout. So we had a meeting. Some of our staff met with some of the DOFA staff and confirmed the new layout based on the new information that we have. And OISC has already initiated the vendor and PO setup now that our account is open and ready. And again, our expected operational date or sometime early in 2025. The bioacoustics monitoring is providing great data for calling frogs, and we can draw some conclusions from those estimates to other to estimate the total frog populations. And it's going to help us target certain areas, as well as being an early detection tool potentially for us in picking up some calling frogs in areas that maybe we haven't been able to get physical human ears out there yet. We have assessed and we will be experimenting with gathering audio via drone, because again, that will be crucial for the Kuli'o'o population. We have assessed koki-proof barriers. This is something that's been utilized in Maui as well. After discussing with some of the folks at MISC, seeing some of the costs and knowing the site characteristics here in Waimanalo, it doesn't appear to be a great tool for our toolkit, but it could potentially be a great tool for some of the other sites we're looking at. So it is in our back pocket. It's still in the toolkit, and we'll continue to assess for the need for any kind of koki-proof barriers. Primarily, they're used in greenhouse settings to prevent koki frogs from coming in to greenhouses, but could be adjusted in certain sites to prevent koki frogs from moving out of an infestation site. And we're also planning to experiment with some passive trapping, excuse me. That's funding dependent, of course, but there has been some successful passive trapping of koki frogs, but on a very small scale. So what we are thinking of exploring is how to ramp that up to a much larger scale with a much more established breeding population with many, many more frogs.
Let's hope.
And with that, I just want to thank all of our partners and funders. Contact information is there on the side. You can feel free to reach out to me at any time. And I'm open for questions if there's time.
Great. Thank you, Nate. That was a very, very extensive, complete report. Very good. With all the good work you're doing with the partners. If there's no questions from the audience, I do have a comment. The Central Oahu outbreak of koki that you mentioned, it wasn't so much that their information was not forthcoming. It's different when you have information for a forest. It's, clearly visible, it's public information. But I think with the case of the Central Oahu, because it was a business, it was not so much the hesitancy, but not to publicize, what's going on in someone's nursery or business. But I can tell you that the HDOE took the lead with all your assistants, Nate and your team. And there was an outbreak, and I think it was 3 or 4 treatments later. And we do, I'm gonna say every 3 or 4 weeks, they'll go back out. I'm gonna use the E word. We're calling it eradication with the assistance of the property owner. And again, when you have a property owner, you have control of the area, unlike a forest, where things are just moving freely. So been highly successful, and bioacoustics was used, but not so sophisticated. Our bioacoustics was more like a phone and you just hearing. What we don't hear anything, so that was good. And shout out to the legislators online and the governor's team online. The $74,000 appropriated through Act 31, every penny of that was used to purchase citric acid, because citric acid is not easy to find. You need it in an emergency. Sometimes you have to wait a while for it to come in. Now we have inventory. We're back getting back inventory. We're sending it out to the neighbor islands. So everyone is benefiting from the 74,000 from Act 231. We got citric acid. So back to you.
Chair, can I ask some questions of Nate?
Absolutely.
So Nate, I have 3 short questions.
Sure.
One is, do I understand you correctly in saying that you believe that the Waimanalo outbreak and the Kuli'o'o outbreak are not related, that they independently came from nearby nurseries because there's no frogs in between and the higher altitudes? Is that what you said?
No, I was referring to the relation between those 2 populations and the Pololo population.
Okay.
Because the Pololo population is very close to a nursery, and the Waimanalo population is very close to a nursery. In terms of the Waimanalo to Kuli'o'o, we don't know for sure, but it sure looks like the distance between those 2 populations, one could be feeding the other, and it would be more likely that the Waimanalo population would be feeding the Kuli'o'o population than vice versa.
Okay, thank you. That's what I understood originally. I just misunderstood you right now. Okay, then my second question is, why are the barriers not a good fit for Waimanalo? Like having a fence down each of those potential boundary lines, moving it in or something like that? Why couldn't it happen?
It could potentially happen, but what you need for those koki barriers is you need to bury the mat at least 4 feet deep into the soil, and it works best for flat areas as per my discussion with the folks over at MISC. And the other thing that they really emphasized was how much maintenance these fences need. And so while it would be a tool that could potentially be used for containment, it's not going to help with control or eradication. And so I was very much encouraged to continue exploring the treatment methods first, and that if there's a site that is a little bit more flat, that has a little bit easier accessibility in terms of terrain, that the koki-proof barrier would be more useful in those sites.
Thank you. And my last question is, where do you think passive trapping would be useful? Is that at nurseries?
Well, what we're thinking is to just kind of see if we ramp up so passive trapping, what we've seen is throughout a number of frog species, you can kind of put PVC piping out and leave it open-ended, and frogs will tend to nest in there and lay eggs. For koki frogs specifically, they need a little bit more than that, but all of the experiments that have been done that I've seen so far are just with small, 3-foot cuts of PVC tubing. So we were thinking of potentially trying to ramp that up to see if we stage a much larger trap in a heavily infested site like Waimanalo, could we collect more frogs passively not as a means of eradication, but as another tool to help with reducing the population, because passive trapping alone, just like hand capturing, would never eradicate a breeding population. But that's where we were thinking. It could potentially be at nurseries, but I think nurseries would benefit a lot more from a audio monitoring, whether that be the fancy bioacoustics monitoring, whether that just be reporting to ACOA or OISC when they hear a potential coqui frog. I think that's much more useful for a nursery, but we're still in the very early stages of discussing this passive trapping. So it's open depending on, what we come across, what suggestions we get, and what other experts information they provide us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Representative, it's a good question because the nurseries and the businesses and the residences, it runs both ways. The natural areas, the pests come into the area, so they have to keep this, when they're finding the coqui, it's usually in the perimeter, or when they're finding the LFA, it's usually in the perimeter, because you protect your production area. To Nate's point, when you set the traps in the nursery, that's where you're going to put them, where the coqui could come from the outside in, because if you can protect your house, let's say, you're going to watch your yard, so it's both ways. You got to keep the coqui from going out into the natural areas, as well as from the natural areas coming in. So did I hear you say that, Nate, that you're going to set the traps in the perimeters?
We're still in development, but we do definitely focus in on the perimeters of what we think the borders are of the infestation. Of course, these borders are quite dynamic for coqui frogs, but in terms of the trapping specifically, we would probably stage them at the heart of the infestation first, just to see if they're going to work and if they're going to attract frogs. And then if we determine that they're effective, then they could definitely be a tool utilized on the borders of an infestation.
Thanks again. Good.
No problem. And appreciate the clarification, Chair, on the Central Oahu site.
Yeah, Chair, may I ask a question? This is Parvan.
Sure. Dean Grewal.
Yeah, Nate, I commend you for all the work that you guys are doing. Very nice update. My question is, these are the only 3 sites where coqui frogs have been reported in Oahu, or we know other sites?
These are the Pololo, Kuli'o'o, and Waimanalo sites are the 3 sites that are under multi-agency response. So if there are other sites, I'm not aware of them right now. There are coqui reports that come in here and there, and Department of Agriculture typically responds to those. And if there is a one-off frog somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, Chair, but they would come out, they would confirm that it's coqui frog, they would capture the coqui frog, and then they would come out and monitor to make sure that that was the only one. So I'm not sure of any other sites where those like singular frogs were reported and responded to, but these 3 sites are where the multi-agency response is focusing.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, how big? It seems like Waimanalo's site is forested and it is pretty large. And do you have a handle on that? You kind of have pretty much contained the infestation? And a related question would be, are you hopeful that we can actually eradicate from at least that site, if you kind of have a handle on the size, the periphery of the site?
Sure. Yeah, the Waimanalo site is the largest site, and it is a very difficult site. So I don't believe that we have that contained right now. I do believe that it is eradicable should we be able to direct the necessary amount of resources and capacity to that site. A site like Pololo is more likely to be eradicated before, just because the approach to that site is less difficult. It's smaller, and we have methods that are tried and true that we know are going to work there. Whereas in Waimanalo and Kuli'o'o, because of the conditions of those sites, we're really needing to experiment. In terms of capacity, it's very important that some of that biosecurity funding went to citric acid because, as Chair said, it's expensive, it's hard to get. But as we ramp up as trying to bring up our capacity for OISC, there's always more resources that we need, and not just funding. So in order to have a full eradication at that site, which would be needed for an island-wide eradication, we're going to need to continually put more resources towards this, whether that be resources coming to, or it should be resources, in my opinion, going to all of the entities that are participating. In terms of whether or not I think eradication is possible, you're talking to an ISC manager, so I'm going to say yes almost always. And I truly believe that. I'm not just saying that. I truly believe that the expertise we have, the people that we have on the ground, and the systems that we're experimenting with, we are very hopeful, not only with the drone treatment, but with the citric pipeline. The citric pipeline has been very difficult to implement because of the conditions of that Waimanalo site. But once it is up and running and working, and we have regular treatments coming off of that citric pipeline, I predict that we see a substantial decrease in the frog population in Waimanalo. Once we start getting that decrease, we can better target our treatments and really start to clean up and systematically work through that infestation. And I do believe that eradication is possible, not only at that site, but at all of the sites, should we have the necessary tools, capacity, and resources leveraged at this species.
Thank you, Nate.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean and Nate. Any other questions that you see out there in the room? No? Nate, I'm so happy to hear you use the E word. It was impossible in the past, especially in the forested areas, because they're so protected out there, but now it's getting better. We're winning. The technology's catching up. Next would be.
Yeah. If I might, Chair, just add on to that. Something that's come up, and this is a great group, is the need for more tools in the toolbox, especially for coqui frog. The only chemical we have approved is citric acid, and the Waimanalo situation has really pushed innovations in how do we control coqui frogs. So it's great to have such a multi-agency team that's brainstorming as they go along and are figuring it out. But again, this is a 10-year commitment. We do have funding through REPI, Department of Defense funding. Division of Forestry and Wildlife has added some funding to kind of get equipment, supplies, and do these operations. But again, this is only short-term funding, and invasive species, especially the situation on Oahu with coqui frogs, is a long-term commitment if we do want to get to the E word, eradication, for that. I think I'm going to continue with just the out of order, and if we could move on to the coconut rhinoceros beetle update, and then we can circle back to little fire ant at the end. So that's Franny Brewer with Big Island Invasive Species Committee, and then Keith Weiser, the Deputy of Operations for the CRB response team.
They're both online?
Yes.
Hi.
Hey, Franny.
Hi. Should I just launch in?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody.
Apologies. If I can cut in, there was a comment on YouTube that I just wanted to put forward for this presentation. And it was an individual just looking to see what they can do to help with the CRB situation. I know it's probably island specific, but if you folks might be able to kind of address that through your presentation, that would be great.
So I guess the only part of Keith is going to talk a little bit more about the broader response. My piece here is just to talk about the development of the plan under the MOU, the agreement. And, as you know, all the plans, the island plans for little fire ant were completed last month. And so now there's a need to move into the plans for Koki and CRB. It doesn't mean that we're not actually responding and doing work. We're doing an extensive amount of work on CRB on this island, but we do need to have a plan that kind of outlines what everyone's roles are and everything that's that we're going to do, especially if it were to turn up in another part of the island. Hopefully everyone is aware. We have only had detections in Waikoloa on the west side of the island. We've had no confirmation of CRB outside of that area, and that's something that's really important for us to keep messaging to the public because we do get a lot of reports of CRB that turn out not to be CRB at all. So that's a relief, and we are happy to get the reports. But in the meantime, so I've been working on the plan with Keith. I don't have a presentation because basically what I have is a bunch of documents, which I'm happy to show you because it just can show you what's happening in my head and my world at the moment, which is just a lot of information that we're trying to consolidate into a document that can really help guide us. So this is the document, and you don't have to read it. I'm gonna scroll through so you can see we have all those places that are yellow are questions, things that we still have to work on, things we still have to talk about. And this is based on two things. This is based on the planning guide that Keith made for all of the islands, uses a template which has outlines of the actions, which we are then filling in with what pertains to our island and what makes sense. And this is also based on the matrix, which was something that I think most people who've been working on this have probably seen these matrices multiple times. This really identifies who the folks are that are involved in a response and who's the lead and who's the assist. And so I've gone through this matrix for the Big Island now for CRB twice, which I'm going to stop sharing. Once with Dexter, getting somebody, this was a few months back, Keith and I went through this with Dexter to determine what roles and responsibilities, particularly within HCOA, there is PQ and then there's PPC, and they have different roles and responsibilities. So we really went through what that would look like for Hawaii Island. And then based on what I had discussed with Dexter, the on-island staff from PQ and PPC, gathered them together with our CTAR on-island person, Pascal Agadian Atalor, and then obviously Bisk was in there, and we had a meeting to go through that matrix as well, so that everyone who's on island was able to respond to sort of, yes, that is something that we would take, or let's have a discussion about that, and who can assist that maybe wasn't put on the assist before. And of course, CRB response as well. So, really bringing everybody together to go through those roles and responsibilities, and then taking all of that information and trying to work that into one plan document. So that is in process. And as you saw, lots of yellow. So there's still a lot of work that we need to do. We were hoping to get it done, or I was hoping to get it done by the end of November. I don't know now if that's a realistic goal, but we are keeping at it. And in the meantime, like I said, it doesn't mean that we're waiting till this plan is done to actually start responding. We have been doing a lot of work on the response, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's all I wanted to say about the plan before I turn it over to Keith to talk about some of the work that they're doing.
Thanks, Franny. I will share my screen. I've got a little presentation that I can share. Mostly this is updates on the status and some of the actions, but of course that relates to the MOU. And one of the things I'd like to add to what Franny said is some of the benefits of the MOU that it brings to the multi-agency effort is data standardization, deciding on regional status, and then specific actions that are defined for the status of each of those regions, and then who's going to be leading and supporting each of those efforts so that there's not too many cooks, and so people know whose job it is to do which aspects of this. So that's really the big advantage. So I will, if I can get this to work, Okay, the infestation status for each island, I'll go over that, go over some maps and just quickly go over some actions. I'll go pretty quickly to leave some time for questions if people have questions. So Oahu is broadly infested, and then there's at least some level of infestation in almost all the lowland areas. There's not much detection and trapping in high altitude areas, but we don't expect populations to be very high in most of the high altitude areas on Oahu. So the main focus is containment to keep the infestations on Oahu. So I'll talk about some of those efforts in later slides. Kauai has a moderate infestation. There's several infested areas, and it's primarily on the eastern half of the island. And they're still in containment. They're regional containment on the islands because there are still areas on Kauai that have no CRB. And then Hawaii Island, as Franny mentioned, that the fines and confirmed damage are restricted to the Waikoloa area. So it's still seems pretty contained. And this is one of our more active areas for the CRB response as well. Maui, it's been just about a year with no fines on Maui. So our detection is not perfect. So it's possible that there are still CRB there and we just can't find them anywhere, but it is a good sign that there's no detections. And for those who don't know, treatments have been done there. So it might have been knocked out, but it's too early to make that call on Maui, but 1 year with no fines is great news. And then all other Hawaiian islands, there have not yet been any confirmed fines or damage. So to go to some maps to show you in visual format, populations. These population estimates are from trapping data. So not all areas have traps, but in the areas that we have traps, which is most of the developed parts of the island where there are roads, you can see the pattern here. So compared to the recent past, we've had increases, particularly on the windward side. Historically, populations have been high in central Oahu and in the last several years on West Oahu. And then the North Shore has been getting worse. I guess it's been several years since CRB have been found there, but it's increasing in those areas. And the urban corridor, although we're seeing increases there, it's very minimal compared to the most heavily affected parts of the island. So I'll talk about the treatment work that we're doing and containment work to try and prevent movement to other islands and to other states or other countries later. So we'll move to Kauai. So as you can see, it's mostly near to the airport areas and Wailua area. So it's restricted primarily to the eastern half of the island. So still want to contain populations where they are. There's not a lot of funding and work being done on CRB. KISC is doing a lot there, but both HDOA and KISC don't have a lot of resources to do very many treatments or containment activities out there currently. Big Island, as we mentioned, Waikoloa area is where all the finds have been. And this sort of more southern find was probably material that got transported in green waste down to this area. So breeding populations, we think, are pretty restricted to the villages area, Waikoloa villages area. And I'll show you some slides in a later slide, some of the work that's being done out there. And then on Maui, just that one find about a year ago, which was a breeding site. And we've been getting steady reports of potential tree damage, but none of it's been confirmed as CRB. So people are keeping their eyes out. And I know MISC is doing a lot of work, both in detection and outreach, and Department of Ag, Aut, is doing a lot of good work out there as well. But still, we haven't had any confirmed finds. So things are looking pretty good on Maui. So moving to Waikoloa, we've had a push recently, both trying to contact and elicit help from the public and going out there in person to do surveys and some door-to-door, focusing on properties that have host plants, mostly palms, getting contacts for people. So this is just a map of some of the contacts that we've gotten so far in an effort to do more treatments near the detections and fines in this area. So those red circles are the buffer we've defined as the area that we're going to focus on trying to get those treatments done. We've already done some treatments in the lower portion of this zone in the big green areas in around the golf course there. But we're focusing on more residential treatments in the future. So hopefully those will be forthcoming soon. And then the work we're doing on Oahu to contain the infestations and prevent reinfestation of the outer islands and any place outside of Oahu really is focused on a lot of palm treatments and removal of green waste around ports. Ports are, of course, an important area. So commodities moving out of Oahu are always a risk. But one thing that we can do is create protection zones by treating the trees around the airports and seaports. So it's with all the trees labeled here, it can be hard to see the borders, but these red borders are the airports on Oahu, and then the blue borders are the seaports. The most traffic is through Honolulu International and the Honolulu Harbor, which are very close to each other, and Joint Base Pearl Harbor, the airfield is included in that buffer as well. And then we've got the Wheeler buffer in central Oahu. So those are the areas that we're primarily working. And then all these sort of pastel colors are just different species of palms in those areas. So just to show you the scope of the work, each of these dots in the pink and purple and green is a tree. So each one of those is, with authorization, we're able to treat. So these are the zones where we're working. And then, so this is the Honolulu Airport and Honolulu Harbor treatment map. And then here's the Wheeler Airfield treatment map. So just to give you a little idea of the zones where my team is primarily working on Oahu for containment to prevent accidental transport out of the ports. So there's a bunch more that's happening in terms of outreach and canine detection and other aspects of the program as well, but I'll stop here, and then of course some contact information, or if you want to follow us on social media and things like that. But if there's any questions, I can address those.
Chair.
Go ahead, Mary Alice.
Keith, I'm a resident of Waimanalo, and there's some stuff circulating on social media about netting our palm trees. Is that an effective preventive measure? It doesn't seem easy for the taller palms, but and the larger ones, but maybe it is helpful for keiki. Yeah, this is true of all treatments, that you really have to use an integrated pest management approach. No single treatment is going to do the job itself. So basically, we try to tell everybody, do as many things as you can, including reducing the breeding material or green waste sanitation, and doing treatments and netting and things like that. So netting is helpful. If all you're doing is netting, you're going to get not as much control as if you dealt with a lot of the breeding material in your area and added chemical treatments on top of that as well. So yes, we promote the use of netting where people can do it. It is pretty labor intensive. And as you said, if you've got a 70-foot tree, unless you've got a lift truck or something, it's not very convenient to reposition that netting. And the netting needs to, once it's applied, it has to be moved as that tree grows. So new fronds emerge, and that's going to push the netting out of the way. So every month or two, you should really get up there and reposition the netting for it to be maximally effective.
Should get up there, Mary Alice. Be careful.
Just make sure you get good insurance.
What is the chemical that you are?
There are a variety of chemicals that mostly through publications and work that's been done at UH for testing, we've identified imidacloprid is one of the primary ones that we use, but also a number of pyrethroids and pyrethrins that can be used as a contact spray up in the crown. Acephate has been identified as another systemic that can be used along with the imidacloprid or instead of the imidacloprid, and that's going to help with pesticide resistance. And there's also ongoing testing to identify other chemicals that can be used. So there are organic and synthetic options. So with the pyrethroid and pyrethrin, some of those are, natural non-synthetic versions, and some of the synthetic versions, there's advantages to both. So yeah, if people want to look at what the treatment options are, they can contact us and we can give them sort of the pros and cons and, our experience with those chemicals.
But Keith, could you take a moment just to go into this, the cautions with the chemicals you just mentioned for fruit bearing trees?
Sure,
Please.
sure. Yeah, so what we've done mostly is injections because it goes directly in the tree. So there's nothing that goes into the soil or off spray into the environment. So those are some of the advantages. The disadvantage is that's a systemic, so it goes into all the tissues to some level. We always trim off the fruits and flowers because the product we use is only labeled for landscaping plants, not production plants. There are other products that can be used on farms for production plants. So your land use and tree use matters with which products you're choosing. So yeah, that's some of the concerns for the imidacloprid. And then the pyrethrins and pyrethroids, there are some products that have been used that are limited to use on some islands, and some are restricted use products as well. So we can give you guidance on that. It's maybe too in-depth to go into all the details right now.
Yeah, but thanks for mentioning that, because it's not for common everyday use for the consumer. There are pollinator cautions, and good time to mention that for the general public, landscapers are tasked to remove the flowers and fruit before they use systemic treatments. And we do provide tape. Our pesticides group has purchased tape to identify the trees that have been treated systemically so that the people do not eat the fruit from that tree. And it's a dated, this tree was treated on such and such date, so do not eat the fruit. Okay, it's a cautionary tale as far as the treatments you mentioned. Just thank you.
Very
Chair?
helpful. I have a question. I don't know if it's as much for Keith as DOA, but on this topic, is there any help for farmers? It wasn't really reflected in the red dots on the trapping map for Oahu, but in reality, we know from on the ground, there's an enormous amount of CRB in the ag land in Waimanalo, and it's very expensive for the farmers or nursery owners to try to manage it. And are there any sort of subsidies for them, whether it's for some of these pesticides or netting or anything else to help them? I've been asked to ask.
Oh, yeah, it's almost like a prompt for me. Thank you, Representative. The compost reimbursement program is now posted on the Department of Agriculture website. You have to buy from certified compost distributors. It's a 50% reimbursement, including transportation. The amount, again, thank you, legislature, was awarded was $400,000. And because of the way that the program is run, it's first come, first serve, maximum 50,000 per application, one per application, one application per person. So it's first come, first serve. The big landscapers will immediately qualify for the 50,000. And so how many 50,000s can you get before you hit your max of 400,000? The answer is 8, right? So homeowners, please buy from a certified, submit your reimbursement as quickly as you can. It's date stamped, and then get your reimbursement. So that's one subsidy provided by the ledge. Thank you through Act 231. The other one is we just did 5 RFPs, one of which was for green waste removal. That one just posted this week. The other one is for the CRB, identifying, removing, hauling, and disposing of properly the coconut trees that are dead, because as Keith knows, that's host for continual breeding sites. As far as the subsidy, the netting, we have I don't know if I can call it a legal thing. I don't think anybody from pesticides is on, but because it's being used in the way that it's being used, it's considered a pesticide. So we need to go through some regulations and get some clearances. But a homeowner, if you want to, it's your private property, you want to buy the netting, the certain eye size is against the fishing rules. It's, so there's.
We changed that.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay. There's still some language that needs to be done. If you're going to claim it's to be used for pesticide, then we have to do some changes. But as far as the netting, the availability of it is kind of a tough call now. It's hard to get. Have you found that to be the case?
I bought some from my project site and I didn't have trouble getting it. I just did that online. But So it sounds like the RFP for the green waste removal and to ID and remove dead trees, that is something that they would go onto a private farmer.
I'm sorry,
land
good
and
question.
plant those?
Great question.
Like,
It's for
how does that
public, land.
help our
It's
farmers?
public lands.
Only public lands.
Right.
Okay, so in terms of helping the farmers, I haven't, I mean, because it's not really about buying compost, it's about managing the CRB on their
Right,
site. And I'm just wondering if there's not anything now, that's fine. We can work on it next session. I'm just trying to
Oh, yeah.
understand.
That would be good. Private property is sometimes the private property owners prefer to take care of the problem themselves. The subsidy would be good, you know, like if there's a chemical that works, the netting that works, something like that, but we didn't want our what is it called, pesticide certified operators to have to go onto private property, although they can by invitation. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Keith, do you know of any pesticides that work for food crops?
Yeah, if you're in a farm setting and you have coconuts for production, there is a restricted use product that is a crown spray. Mustang Max is one that's approved in the state. So that's an option for farms.
But it has to be approved, applied aerially?
No, it does have to be applied to the crown. That can be by drone, but can also be by a pump sprayer that you take up into the tree, or a ground-based spray. We've got some methods we're working on for a ground-based pump and a spray nozzle hoisted up into the top of the tree. So yeah, once we've got a good protocol, we can share that with whoever wants it.
Okay, but nothing for food crop, nothing for row crops right now. It's a strong bug. Thank you, Keith. Someday we'll have better news, right? Got to be hopeful. Michelle?
Yep.
Call.
Next, yeah, we have Michelle Montgomery from the Hawai'i Ant Lab with a little fire ant update, and just letting folks know, I think we have a hard stop at 12:30,
Okay.
and we have one more agenda item after this
Okay,
presentation.
Dean, did you have something to say, Dean Graywell? Did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay, I just wondered, you came on the screen, so thank you. Michelle?
Yes, thank you. I will try to zoom through this then, in respect of everybody's time. All right, so this is a little update on the invasion status and our response, what we've been doing collaboratively for the response plans. So in Hawaii, oh, I'm sorry. There we go. All right.
You're not in the, there you go. Yeah, perfect.
You guys ready? Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this past year has seen a significant uptick in little fire ant detections, especially on Maui, Oahu, and Kauai. Maui has seen 8 new infestations, most in this in the past couple months, I believe. Oahu, 19 new detections as of this year so far. Kauai, also 8 new infestations, 6 of which are nurseries. And so this is very concerning for all of us. And it's very, very frustrating. We're doing the best we can, but it really makes us want to constantly assess where we're at on the invasion curve. Right now we are steadily shifting to the right. That doesn't mean that we cannot shift back. So the response plans that we have been working on, these response plans in order to address this and to identify each of our roles. What are our roles? What is our kuleana on each of the islands? The response plans are, I'm sure you guys have been already talking about these response plans already, but this is interagency And it consists of Department of Agriculture, the HISC, which is you guys, which is bringing us all together, DLNR and UH. And from UH, it's HAL and all of the island ISCs. We've gotten together because each island is slightly different in their invasion status and the history of the response on island. We all have a little bit different response plans, and so they're pretty individualized. The goal is that by implementing these response plans, we will be able to shift the statuses, the invasion statuses backward on that curve. The difficulty that we've all identified during this process and we've consistently talked about lies with on-island capacity and the funding of all of the partners. Because each one of us has very specific roles and responsibilities and duties, if one partner is not sufficiently funded, then that's a major and massive gap in the response plan, and it's not going to do any good. It's not going to actually shift anything backward on the curve. For Maui, to date, there have been 27 detections. There have been a number of successful eradications on Maui. 8 of these detections are new within the past few months. One of them was at Haleakala National Park, from what I understand. That infestation has been handed over to park staff with guidance from MISC. There are also 4 of these new infestations were early detections, and so MISC was able to go and do a rapid response and determine that these are functionally eradicated. They will continue to monitor for their 5-year, to get their 5 years of no detections before they consider it fully eradicated, though. The other infestations that were newly detected add up to approximately 45 acres, a bit more than 45 acres. And one of those sites is already undergoing and just started some aerial treatments, and another site will also be requiring aerial bait applications. And I believe MISC is looking into and working out their drone program in order to be able to treat those large sites. MISC is leading the bulk of the response. And so far, they don't suspect that LFA have really infiltrated the nursery system. They don't have reason to believe that anyways. And so the hope is that it's not being shared and spread in that way at the moment. Oahu is a bit different story. Their total, so far, there have been at least 69 residential infestations detected on island. No, so this doesn't, the 69 sites does not include the nursery sites. There are 19 new detections this year. We're definitely well over the capacity of both HAL and OISC in order to be able to rapidly respond and manage these sites. We do know that at least two of these residential sites has a link or an association with one of the with a couple of nurseries that have been offering landscaping services for a number of years. And so that's pretty discouraging. For the response plans on Oahu, OISC, this is the response plan. Because of the status, we are trying to delegate and share responsibility between partners. And so OISC and HAL are responsible for, we've taken on the responsibility for working with residents. OISC has funding under REPI to be able to work on the east side of the Ko'ola region. And HAL, because of our capacity, our limited capacity and unlikeliness of being able to grow, we are really focusing on the historical sites that have been undergoing and have undergone the full treatment regime and monitoring to make sure those are successful and implementing our community action plan. And this is pretty much island-wide. And then also building upon our extension program to do the most good with the limited resources that we do have. HDOA, their role is focusing really heavily on the nurseries and trying to get that under wraps, and also implementing, building up to implementing their new PCO control program, which will be a statewide program. On Kauai, there have been 15 detections to date. 8 of them are new this year, including 6 nurseries. This is extremely disconcerting. One of the largest nurseries on island that has been supplying plants to other nurseries has been one of those that have come up positive. Hal and Kisk both went over there and worked with that nursery. We did a 3-day site inspection and site assessment and provided them with a very detailed best management plan. And it's uncertain how far or whether or not they will follow that management plan carefully. And we are looking towards HDOA to provide that assistance in order to help get that under control as well. Kisk is leading the bulk of the work. But they also have limited resources. And so they are seeking and trying to work with HDOA to get a handle on the situation on island as best as possible.
Thank you.
And I'm sure that Director Hurd will update the Act 2231. But just as a little appetizer here, if you will, it is coming, and 1.2 million has been earmarked for little fire ant mitigation. This is a statewide program, and HDOA did put out their RFP for licensed pest control operators to go and be able to treat residential properties on Hawaii Island, Maui, Oahu, and Kauai. And I know this will, the goal is really to get more residential sites under control than what OISC and HAL is currently able to do on our own with our current capacity. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. And the reason you had in there that, some of the ISR are ineligible, and it's because the PCOs have the staffing, and they have the expertise, you might say, on how, especially with the residents, if there's allergies within the population or some special organic treatment they want or special needs, the PCOs have the training and the tools to enforce that, as well as the liability and resources. So we wanted to partner with the PCOs to enhance the program that you, Hal, and the ISA doing. You're doing a great job. We certainly do need the expertise of the specialized treatments that the organics that the PCOs have been doing. So thank you. Any questions for? Yeah.
Sure. What's the PCO?
Oh, I'm sorry. Pesticide certified.
Pest control operator.
Pest control
Pest
operator.
control
Certified.
operator.
They've got the license and the insurance and the business license. So they're,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
So
Sorry.
Sharon, are the PCOs, are they using the same treatment techniques as HAL? Because that's been proven. Are they using this?
They have certain licenses that they go through, that they have more access to training to the PCOs, but I'll let Michelle answer that. Do you have access to the same treatments?
Or the other way where I was asking, do the PCOs have access to the treatments? Because my understanding is that how your treatments have been proven successful. So does the PCOs are they utilizing the same treatments that you are, or are they using other treatments?
Well, at this time, there's only been 4 PCOs on Oahu anyways, that have been trained to manage little fire ants, because this treatment isn't your standard generalized pest control that these PCOs are licensed and experienced in doing. It's a special multi-service, and there's a lot of nuances. And so right now there are 4 companies that have been trained by HAL on Oahu. None have been trained on Kauai, none have been trained on Maui. And we've been working with the industry on Big Island for years. That said, we will continue our pest control operators training program, but it's not necessarily an ad lib service. We have to go by what we have committed to under our current funding, which would be, we would offer 4 training services in 2025 to meet those objectives. And if any other pest control company wants to join in and be trained and get that experience, then they're welcome to join in on those trainings.
Thank you. Nate, did you have something?
I was just making myself available for comments, and so it's mentioned in this meeting. But I would say that I think it is very important for us to be following the best management practices as outlined by HAL, whoever is doing the treating, and that's not just using the certain pesticides. That's following the treatment schedule, that's following the monitoring schedule, and I'm not certain that PCOs have the ability or are willing to do that. But I just want to emphasize that if we want any hope towards containment, even not even speaking about eradication on Oahu, there are tried and true methods to getting us to that point. And whoever is doing that treatment, whether it be the experts over at HAL or whether it be bringing PCOs up to speed based on HAL's trainings, they really need to be following those best management practices. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on a wound that's going to continue to reopen. So
Good comment, Nate. That's why the RFP included HAL and the ISCs in with the in collaboration with the PCOs who have again license. So good. Sorry.
I
I'm
had a
sorry,
question.
in the RFP, HAL and the ISCs are included in there?
As resources that you could participate, you're not excluded, but you would be doing the work, you'd be providing advice.
But they're not eligible.
We can't provide advice if we're not funded
Okay.
to provide that.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
Chair?
yeah, thanks.
I'm so concerned about this strategy, right? Instead of funding the experts, funding people with no experiences, companies with no experience in this. Although I do see the benefit of training, and I've been there when some of these companies have been trained in our community treatments. But what I worry about is that they will not do the surveying to delimit the entire infestation and get everybody treated. That it may just be like the way private companies operate now, that an individual would call them to have their property treated. And we wouldn't, I mean, to me, that's like giving up on Oahu, basically, to say that we're no longer going to do this kind of professional delimiting and eradication in a neighborhood, that it's just going to be response to individual homes or something like that. So I have a lot of concerns.
And then we did too, when we fashioned it, the concern was with liability and with the residential homeowner having individual preferences, allergies, kupuna, requiring certain kinds of treatments. And so we were cautious with that. And because they had the licenses and registered to do business, and we felt we'd start with that. And then with the next round of funding, we would expand it, see how this goes, and see how we can expand on what we're doing with the 1.2 statewide. Okay, but points well taken.
Thank you.
I'm going to leave it to you, Chelsea, as to whether we defer item 6.
Yes, I spoke with the presenter of that and she's okay with deferring item 6. It's not time sensitive and it's a non-voting matter. So if that's okay with the council, we can move to the next meeting.
Appreciate that.
If there are no objections, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Come on, Don.
Oh, well, I'll second the motion.
Thanks. It's
Yeah,
moved
yeah,
and
yeah,
seconded. Meeting is adjourned right on the spot, 12:30.
Perfect.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.